Hey, Pastor Kris, welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Super glad to have you on. Been following you and following your ministry for quite a number of years. And so the fact that I'm able to sit here and talk to you is a big deal, and really appreciate you taking time to make this happen for us. Now, before we go into all of the great advice and wisdom that you're going to share with us today, for those who are not familiar with you and your ministry, can you just take a moment and introduce yourself to everybody and let them know what you're all about?
I will. Well, let's see. I'm married for 43 years. I have 4 kids and 8 grandkids. I love the grandkids a lot better than the children, so I would have skipped right to grandkids. I was in business for 20 years. Kathy and I, my wife, were in business. We owned 9 businesses, started 7 of them. There was all automotive businesses, so auto repair shops, auto parts stores, auto consulting company. And then I came to Bethel Church 20 years ago, and we came to co-found the school of ministry, Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry, with Bill Johnson. And that school's grown to, I don't know, we graduated 2,401 students last year from 67 countries. We had 127 students from Germany last year. The largest vocational school approved by Homeland Security in the United States. So very exciting. And so I've been with Bill. Kathy and I have been with Bill this is our 40th year. We've been with Bill Johnson for 40 years. So when Bill was in a little church in Weaverville, California, I mean, think about it, Weaverville. You can't sound like you have an education when you're from Weaverville. We were with Bill there for 20 years with Bill, and we were, elders and leaders, and kind of a small church, so we were kind of everything with about 5 other people, 5 other teams, and 5 other couples, and yeah, so that's kind of our history. And then we moved here and started school of ministry, and started a school of business here, started a school of technology, started the Bethel School of Music, worship here, and yep. So it's just been a kind of a growing thing, and we find ourselves here.
Growing, I think, is an understatement. And for those who aren't crystal clear, this is Bethel. This is the Bethel. The one with all the world-renowned music and the world-renowned pastoring. This is that Bethel, ladies and gentlemen. And you've been around for 40 years. That's an amazing ministerial career. That's an amazing career of any sort. So salute to you and all the impact that you had on this world as a result of you answering the call to ministry. Now, in addition to all of the great things that you've done, you mentioned the entrepreneurial endeavors, you mentioned the different schools in the side of ministry that you have launched. In addition to that, you have written over a dozen books before your latest book. And I'm curious, this latest book is different a little bit, slightly, from the other. So talk to us about how did you end up going in this direction with your latest book, Poverty, Riches, and Wealth?
Well, here's the deal. I grew up in American poverty. Now, we have to specify American poverty because we all know that, there's, India, Africa, places in Mexico, extreme poverty, people living in boxes. So not that kind of poverty, but American poverty. And when before I got saved, I mean, we hated rich people. We would have never said that, of course, but we just didn't like wealthy people. Like, we had built a case against every wealthy person, and we believed that, if people were wealthy, then they did something evil to get there, or they have some evil motive for being wealthy. And so then I got saved when I was 18, and I got saved into the royal family, right? It's like our dad's a king, and our brother's, Jesus, and he's the, King of Kings, and and we're sitting on a royal throne, and we've been raised up and seated with Christ in heavenly places, and we are heirs to the throne. And our dad is not president of presidents; he's King of Kings, which makes us an actual heir to the throne. And I was taught all this stuff, and I'm like, wow, I grew up in poverty, and I have hit it rich. I married into a rich family, so to speak, But then it didn't take very long for me to figure out that although I was in a wealthy family, I was with people that had the same mindset as the mindset I came out of. People were, they took a few verses in the Bible, and it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom than it is for a camel to go through the eye of the needle, and that became like the motto, the motto of the kingdom. Like it said that over the door of the kingdom, like you got in, and you better not have any money if you came in here, And that was kind of the mentality. And I'm like, well, we also resented wealthy people, and we also built cases against people that we're prosperous, and we also had it, we use Christian words for them now. And then I went through this season, Kathy and I, through a series of we sold our business to this $500 million company. We sold 3 of our businesses to move to Reading, to come onto the full-time ministry. And once we got here, a month after we got here, those people went bankrupt. The corporation, the public corporation, went bankrupt and didn't pay us. And consequently, we owed $1.8 million. We were in this crazy, desperate place. We went to the elders and said, we got to quit. I mean, what are we going to do? We're making $1,000 each a month, and it will take us, 2 millennials to pay this off. And the bottom line is, they asked us not to quit and to trust God for His provision. And they said, please don't bankrupt for 6 months. And we're like, okay, we lost our house, we lost everything but our 2 cars and our furniture. And the first thing that happened is they prayed for us. The elders prayed for us after we shared the story with them. And they said, would you please not bankrupt for 6 months? And I said, I don't have any faith for that. And they said, would you trust my faith? And I'm like, well, what's 6 months? Let's do this. And they prayed for us, and the first thing that happened is we got forgiven $900,000 of the $1.8 million. That was a good beginning. And then this journey of poverty, riches, and wealth really began with this man. About a month after that forgiveness, this man who I did not know gave me a check for $30,000. And I spent 6 months avoiding him. And then one day I ran into the restroom. His name's Eli. Eli was in there. His back was to me. He didn't see me. I turned around. I ran out. I'm running to the next restroom, which is like a football field away. And I finally recognized there's something wrong with me. Like I was unconsciously ignorant. Like I did not know that I did not know. Like I was so in denial. I had no idea I was avoiding Eli for months after he gave me money. I went to bed that night, and probably like this has probably happened to you before. I couldn't sleep. I'm laying there like, okay, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? So finally, about 3 or 4 in the morning, I say to the Lord, Lord, I think there's something wrong with me. And He said, yes. And I said, do you know what it is? He said, do you really want to know? And we entered into this conversation. And the Lord said to me, I said, do you know why, Eli, why I'm afraid to see Eli? And he said, he gave you $30,000. I said, I know that. He said, well, here's the problem. You don't love yourself $30,000 worth. And you're afraid that if Eli gets to know you, he'll be sorry he gave you the money. And that began a journey. And the Lord began to say to me, you're worth more than $30,000. You're worth more than $1 million. But you're priceless to me. And you're the only one that doesn't know you're valuable. Well, I went through this season where I began to realize, like, you're never going to let someone love you more than you love yourself. And if you get more prosperous on the outside than you are on the inside, you're going to sabotage your wealth. And I realized, like, I really actually had a poverty mentality. God said, to Moses in Deuteronomy 8:18, tell the people, I'm going to give them power to make wealth, that I would confirm my covenant with them. And I realized then, like, there's a power to make wealth, but there's also a power to create poverty. And I was entrenched in poverty. That's kind of the beginning of my story.
Now, man, so many different directions I want to go after that. Number one, everybody, you got to pick up Pastor Chris's new book, Poverty, Riches, and Wealth. I'm telling you, you won't regret it. So now you had that moment, and then, like you said, it was a journey because I don't know how many years were in between, but I know it was a number of years in between that moment where God took a million plus debt and it went down. I want to say like 11,000 after it was all said and done.
No, what happened was, it took 3 years to pay that debt off or forgive it. Forgiveness. And so, for instance, the story you're repeating there is we got forgiven 900,000, and then we owed 200, I think almost 300,000 to the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and they sent me a note and said, pay us 11,000 and we'll forgive it, the rest. And I'm like, okay, but 11,000 was like, you know how that is. $11,000 when you're broke is like $1,000,000, right? So, and that's when Eli gave us the money. He gave us the money on the 20. They gave us 30 days. He gave us the money on the 29th day, the $30,000. So get this. So we paid off the 11,000. We paid 11,000. They forgave the rest. So like, what would that be like? $287,000 they forgave. We paid off the IRS and we paid off the State Board of Equalization, and it came to almost within $1 of $30,000. We paid all of those things off. So we were just like, the Lord was giving us money and we were chunking it out like that. And in the third year, at the end of the third year, we had paid off or got forgiven every single bit of money.
And the thing, I mean, there's so many things that are powerful about this testimony, but in reading through your book, this amazing thing takes place where God completely takes care of $1 million plus of debt for you, and it's an eye-opening watershed moment for you about, like you just said when you referenced Deuteronomy, where it says that God gives us the power to create wealth. But there was still you still had some mindsets that you had to fight through, because you fast forward, I don't know how many years, but I want to say 10, 15, 20 years where somebody wants to pay your house off and you struggle with accepting that gift because you wanted him to clarify what he was hearing from God. So my question in that is, for those who are where you were mentally, like they see, because in some circles the word prosperity is almost a bad word, like you referenced in the book, because some people, not all, but some people took it and went all the way left with some of the ways that they took some of the scriptures out of context, and that has caused people to say, and self included, for a number of years, I want nothing to do with, anytime I heard the word prosperity, it made my skin crawl, because I automatically assigned that word to the way that scriptures were being taken out of context, and not allowing myself to see what the proper context, because the word prosperity is biblical when you keep it in the right context. So I say all that to say this: how did you escape that mindset? Because it wasn't necessarily what just happened with the debt elimination that automatically changed your mind. There was still a lot of peeling back that you had to do in order to get to the place where you're at now, just mentally, when it comes to biblical wealth.
Exactly. And, I think that life is a journey, right? And then, it was, I think it was Eric Hoffer who said, learners inherit the earth, while the learned find themselves beautifully prepared for a world that no longer exists. So I think that we're all in this process of learning, and I almost see it as an onion, where you think you learned it, and then something happens to reveal that there's deeper issues. Like the house payoff was nearly 500,000, 460 something thousand. And it's like, wow, okay, so I did pretty good with the 30,000. I've been given 50,000, 30,000, 80,000, but now we're talking about nearly $500,000. So now you start thinking about, do I want this guy to own me? There's a whole nother set of values that come up, like, wow, that's not, I can't generate $500,000 very quickly. So, suddenly it's like, if you gave me 30 grand now, I've become wealthy enough that I could give you 30 grand back in a month. But if you give me 500 grand and I pay off my house and then you decide you don't like me, I can't give your $500,000. I don't have it to give, So all of a sudden there's a whole nother mindset that you're working through, and you're asking yourself, like, not just am I worthy of this, but is this person, are the people that give to us, and let's forget just that guy, but do they want something? Kind of Abraham said to the king of Sodom when he rescued the Sodomites from 4 kings. He tried to give Abraham all the wealth of his city, and Abraham said, "No, I can't take that wealth. At least you say you made me rich." And yet Abraham received money from other kings. So we have this other dynamic, that part of being a royalty is that we want to not be owned. We want to be noble people who are not beholden to somebody who gave us money, or someone who did a deed for us. A big part of that.
How can we, if we're not sure, because sometimes when you're in your ways, that's all you know. How can we reflect and realize whether or not we may have a poverty mindset?
Well, there's lots of things, but let's just say it this way. Here are first symptoms. When is it easy for you to give, but when someone gives back to you, you like, or gives you a compliment, or does something nice for you, you almost like, oh no, please don't. It's like someone says, "Wow, that was a great message, and really love that," or beautiful dress you made, and that's so, wow, that's one of the nicest, and you're like, "Oh, stop, you're killing me." Like inside, I really want the compliment to stop. It's a sign. That's a sign that I have a poverty mentality. And what I mean by that is that you're loving me more on the outside than I'm loving me on the inside. When you love me, when Jesus said, "Love your neighbor as you love yourself," that's a big as. You got to make sure you love you so that you can love them. But also, you have to make sure you love you so you can be loved by them. So when someone loves me more than I love me, I begin to like, no, 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 that's not me. Thank you very much. Oh, shut it down. Please don't say anything else nice to me. No, I couldn't have. Oh, no, I couldn't. I couldn't take your place. No, I couldn't. No, I couldn't get that. I couldn't take that dress from you. Thank you so very much, but no, I really can't do that. Those are often signs that you have inadvertently loved me more than I have loved me. And I begin to sabotage my prosperity. Here's the crazy thing. So let's step back for a second. For 20 years, we owned 9 different businesses, 4 of them at a time at one point. I realized 15 years later, so 35 years from the first business, that my businesses, although we always did really well, they would have never really prospered and made me wealthy. You know why? I would have not let them. Because inadvertently, I already had a relief valve so that I was never going to accumulate any kind of wealth because I never thought I was worth it. So, consequently, we owned 9 businesses. We always did really well. We typically give away like extraordinary amounts of money. And I look back and I think, yes, we were generous, but the other thing was that we were not going to allow ourselves, our bank account, to get bigger than our esteem. Crazy as that sounds.
You also teach in the book that we should be pursuing wealth and not riches. What's the difference between the two, and how do we endeavor on this pursuit?
Well, okay, so let me say this just for our listeners. The word wealth and the word riches, there's only one Greek word and Hebrew word for both of those. So there's not a distinction in the original languages for wealth and riches. I make the distinction because the Bible does create distinctions in context, although it doesn't create distinctions in the actual word, if that makes sense. So I say that rich people get their identity from their stuff. They get their identity from their house, from their car, from their whatever their clothes, whatever your thing is. In different cultures, it's different things, right? And wealthy people, they get their identity from God, from the inside out. So some rich people, some people own houses, but houses own some people. You know, Wealthy people are not identified by the things they have or the positions they hold. Their identity is coming from the Lord Himself. It's coming from the inside out. Rich people do stuff for love. Wealthy people do stuff from love. So, we just have all these distinctions. Rich people give to people. Wealthy people invest in people. Rich people, live for today, but wealthy people live for a legacy. These are all just distinctions, mindsets that say, like, a righteous man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So a wealthy person's thinking not just about their day, they're thinking about what kind of impact is my life going to have on the generations I will never see. This is a wealth mentality. This is what kind of legacy am I leaving? If you think about some of the extreme wealth people in America, for instance, we live in America. So, and what are super wealthy people interested in? They're interested in leaving a legacy, making a mark for generations to come. And this is all part of a wealth mentality. It's not live for today. It's live for a generation you'll never see.
Love reading, but wish you had more time to get into your favorite books? What if you could use the time you already have and listen to the books you already love? Well, now you can with Audible. With Audible books, you can be inspired, entertained, and educated anywhere, anytime. Choose from the bestsellers in self-development, business, nonfiction, and more. So what are you waiting for? Your first 30 days are free. Visit hisandhermoney.com/audible to get started today. That's hisandhermoney.com/audible.
What was it that finally broke it for you to be able to shift from the poverty mindset that you once struggled with to the mindset that you have now? Because like you said, it was a journey, but for somebody who's like, okay, maybe I do have a poverty mindset after listening to what you shared so far, for you personally, what was it that what was the final blow that kind of woke you up to realizing that the way that you were thinking about interacting with money may not be the best, most efficient way, most biblical way for you to do?
I would say that it began, and again, it was and is a journey. But the journey began with the Lord insisting that I understand, learn, and embrace who I am and whose I am. And He began to literally love the hell out of me. Like, love the hell out of me. He began to show me that I am favored, that I am loved, that actually, and the truth is, for everyone's listening, it's not Kris Vallotton so special, it's that we're all special. Because there is only one creature in all of the heavens. Like, if you could fly to the furthest universes, you would never, as far as we know from the scripture, you would never find anyone as amazing as you, because you are the only creature ever created in the image of God. Therefore, you are inherently a creature that is blessed by the Creator. The angels long to look into what we know. Angels are beautiful and glorious, but they are not made in the image of God. Animals, creatures, living creatures that fly around God's throne. Just name any creature, amazing as they are. No creature was ever created to be exactly like God. So, when you come to grips, and I'm saying it's, coming to grips is a relative term. It's like, again, it's the onion. It's like come to grips with, like, oh, God who created everything, He's my daddy. What am I afraid of? what am I mean, if daddy likes me and you don't like me, how relevant is that? That the guy who made me, that made all the universes, that holds everything in his hands, he says, I don't like you. I'm wild about you. I am in love with you. I am passionate about you. Well, if you don't like me, how relevant is that to the guy who does? So, all of a sudden, little by little, I start to realize, like, wow, I was created for glory, and I'm the only one who doesn't know it.
Wow. That's a powerful statement right there. Here at His and Her Money, we place a very high value, and we spend a lot of time teaching on the importance of getting out of debt. Proverbs tells us that to borrow is slavery to the lender. Romans tells us to owe no man nothing but love. And so we harp on that pretty heavy here. In your journey, where and in your study, how important is that to us as believers in accomplishing what God wants us to accomplish, whatever our individual pursuits of destiny or purposes are? How important is it to be intentional, to be working towards that freedom?
Oh, I think it's really, you just quoted some of my favorite scriptures. It's like, I think that, let me say this. I do think it's a journey. So I don't know if we may, see it a little differently than, I don't know what your philosophy is on it, but I do think it's.
No, we teach that it is a journey, it's a process. It's not the same for everybody, but we just progress. We tell everybody to focus on progress and not perfection. If you're not able to pay your house off tomorrow, are you able to pay a credit card off in 3 months? What can you do? What type of progress can you make towards becoming debt free?
I completely agree, and again, I would, and I bet you encourage this. The things that have that are relative to the fact that they have, they don't, their value doesn't increase. I mean, you don't pay off your credit card; it goes the wrong way. It's like buying a house and you pay $200,000 for it, and next week it's worth 180. That's what happens when you don't pay off a credit card. Like, it's going the wrong direction. And at some point, this $200,000 house is worth, $40,000 because in metaphorically speaking, because you didn't pay your credit card off, right? So, I mean, things that don't increase in value, those should be paid off first. That's the way I view that. And the other thing is, and what we were doing before that man paid off our house is we were doubling our house payments. We'd been doubling and tripling our house payments because how quickly you can pay off a house. We always take out a 15-year mortgage and not a 30, because the payment's not that much different, and you're paying it off at least twice as fast just by doing that. I tell the students all the time, it's like you go out and let's say you buy Starbucks once a day. What's that? $4, $5, and you multiply that times a month. That's $150. It's like. And you can't pay your rent, but you bought Starbucks every day for 30 days, It's like you're spending someone else's money. That's not your money. You didn't buy Starbucks with your money. You bought Starbucks with your rent, with your landlord's rent money, All of those things that I'm sure that you would agree with all of that. It's like, no, like, let's be serious about being debt free. I say to our students, I said, there used to be a time in history, you're not going to believe this, but when you ran out of money, you couldn't buy anything. And of course, exactly. When your parents and my parents were kids and they didn't have money, right? If their kids need shoes, they went without shoes because they didn't have it. They couldn't charge it forever.
I don't think there's enough sound wealth conversations. I'm talking about financial wealth conversations in the church. I'm under the impression that, and I submit this to you to tell me if I'm right or wrong. I believe that there are two ways to accumulate financial wealth: investments and entrepreneurship. And I don't think we talk enough about those things. We talk about tithes, we talk about giving. And why do you think the other upper level conversations are lacking in the church world?
Well, one, it's just small thinking, right? I mean, I would propose that Christians, unfortunately, as we are both leaders in the church, are some of the smallest thinkers in the world. It's like I look at Elon Musk and some of these amazing, brilliant people, and I'm like, they started small. Elon Musk starts in his garage. Bill Gates starts in his garage. It's Apple starts in a garage. It's like, and sometimes I think we sometimes, and I'd say the millennials are maybe even tougher at this, and that is sometimes we, like, if we can't like have it perfect to start with, we're like, we don't want to do it at all. And I'm like, years ago I started a business school, and we had the first year we had 40 students for 9 months, and the first week we gave them all $100, and we said at the end of 9 months, whoever makes the most money with this $100 will win the prize, scholarship for year 2, and a plaque. Now, it's only $100, right? I mean, what can you do with $100? Well, you can do a lot with $100, because now you start thinking about it like this. It's like, okay, I have this $100, and it's a game, right? It's like, okay, what can I do with this $100 to make the most amount of money? So, one guy goes, he takes the $100 and he buys, a rake, a shovel and a broom and some trimmers, and he goes and he makes $200. He makes another $100, makes $200 with his equipment, cutting lawns and trimming lawns, with what he had. And he takes that $200 and he goes out and buys a used lawnmower. Now the $100 made $200. Now I bought a lawnmower. Now he goes out and he does large properties and large lawns, and pretty soon he makes $1,000 in 2 months with his lawnmower and his tools. That $100 already became $1,000, right? He's already increased his wealth by 10 times. It's like, okay, and think about, I think if we just but what I'm getting at is, don't despise the day of small beginnings. Sometimes we think, well, I got to have $10,000 to be an entrepreneur. No. If you have $100 and you have an entrepreneur spirit, you can make that $100 $10,000 in a year or two. You might bake cookies. You might say, well, I don't know. I have no skills. Like, all I know how to do is bake cookies. Well, think as Mrs. Fields, cookies, I bake pies. It's like, okay, well, how about Marie calendars? Like, these are the way these people started. They took a very small amount of money in a season where there was no credit. There was no credit cards. And they invested in pies, and they sold them to their neighbors. And they took the profit that they made from those pies, and they invested in more pies. And it goes on and on. Then, if you follow Marie Callender's, she buys a truck and she delivers the pies to her neighbors with the truck. But it all started with a few pies. And I say to everyone, like, they're like, God, I just don't know what to do. It's like, can you find $100 somewhere, anywhere? Yes. Okay. Well, maybe I can borrow it from someone. Okay. Well, I don't really like borrowing it, but see if you can borrow $100 for a month. Can you take that $100? Can you make it $200 in a month? Like, if you just focused on, how do I make this $100 bring me back more money? Can I make this $100 be a servant instead of a master to me? It's that simple. It's not brain surgery. This is not rocket science. This is about, and I think that an average person with average intelligence, especially in a first world country, let's say that part, could make 100 times their money every year if they focused on it. And I'm not talking about like someone with a ton of experience. I'm talking about someone who has a brain, who works hard, who's consistent, and who puts their effort into that one thing.
I kind of want to stay there for a little bit because as I reflect, you've had success in ministry, you've had success in business. Both have super high turnover rates. Most businesses fail. Most pastors walk away from ministry because they're both tough. You did both, and for a good amount of time, you did it simultaneously. Now, somebody like me and others that are listening, we have a burden for both. We have a burden for the work that we do in ministry. We have a burden for the work that we do in the marketplace. And there's plenty of pastors that are dual career. Yeah. And like, how or what advice can you give to people like that who feel like maybe they're torn, like I have to do one or the other, or they don't know how to give the best effort in both areas? You were able to do both, which is amazing. So I was wondering, like, what type of advice can you give to somebody who's starting or who's in the middle of it, trying to figure out how to juggle it all?
Okay, so let me tell you this. I wouldn't. My first thing is I wouldn't. I'm not doing both. I'm only doing ministry. So when Jesus said, "Seek first the kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be added to you," what I learned 40 years ago from Bill Johnson in his very first message was that when I received Jesus, everything I do from that day forward is sacred. I no longer have a secular job. When I own a business, that business is in the kingdom. When I sell auto parts, what I do in that auto parts store is every bit as holy and valuable as what the guy does behind the podium. So I never said, well, on Wednesday nights we have home group at my house and I teach, and now I'm doing my ministry. When I receive Jesus, I take everything, I pull it all into the kingdom. And now I don't have a dualistic mindset. And I'll tell you the biggest thing, well, there's so many, I'm sure you're really smart. I can see your brain working already. But what happens when you do that is suddenly you think, the Holy Spirit cares about my business. Like my business is actually a holy ministry. And over here, I'm serving the Lord by selling auto parts. The same way as Queen of Sheba comes and sees Solomon's table set, his waiter's dress. She sees practical things and she goes, "You are twice as wise as I heard in my country." And I'm saying, when we take God to work, when we say, this is holy ground. I work at the post office. When I walk in, that post office is holy ground. When I have 3 kids. I am not raising children. I'm raising world changers. I'm here discipling nations with Johnny, Mary, and Jane. I am discipling nations. I am raising up Solomons. I'm raising up Esthers. Suddenly, I'll start to, first of all, when I do that, I put so much more value on everything I'm doing. Because, what I hear some pastors say, and I'll tell you, I just hate this. They basically say to business people, you guys are the guys that go out and make the money so we can do the ministry. I'm like, no. They're doing the ministry as much as anybody who has a collar on or calls himself clergy. Like, they're doing the ministry. And they're touching people who will never come into the 4 walls of the church or the synagogue or the sanctuary. That's what we need to do.
You're correct. And noted. My mindset just changed right there off that one comment. Thank you. So now, as we wrap things up,
think about what you're doing. Can I just say this to you? Like, I feel like I'm supposed to say this to you. Like, you're having an impact on people that I will never touch in this church. That people relate to you and love you because you live, quote, a normal life, and you are bringing the kingdom to people and places, well, no one will ever touch. Think about the most famous people in the Bible. Daniel, he's not a priest. He's not a religious guy. Joseph, not a religious guy. Esther, not a religious guy. David, a king. Not even the tribe of Levi. Not even from the right tribe. I mean, just list all the famous people. How many of those people in the Bible were, quote, in the ministry? You'll be hard pressed to find them. So this is who you are. Like, I'm excited for you and for your wife and what you're bringing to not just the African American community, but what you're bringing to the community of Chicago and around. It's like, that's why I'm excited to be on the show. That's why I agreed to be on the show, because I love what God's doing in you. Anyway, I just want to tell you that.
I 1000% receive it, and I totally appreciate you speaking that. My heart resonated with it, and you know, it's fuel, because sometimes you do the work and you're not so sure if you're doing the work. So that's much appreciated. Now, if there are people listening who have a desire, because I mean, you just dropped so much wisdom here, and they're like, okay, I definitely need to make some adjustments. What are some practical things that they can do just to get started? Like, they're starting from the bottom, like they are starting from where you were with. They have had a poverty mindset. They realize that, oh, I need to not be thinking this way. I need to interact with money differently. How can we help them move from a life of lack to true kingdom abundance, which is the subtitle of your new book?
Okay, just a quick things. Number one, take 10 minutes every day before you go anywhere and ask Daddy what he thinks of you and write it down. Then day 2, write it on your mirror. Write it on your mirror. The Lord says, I am. Whatever it is. Repeat it. Get it in your spirit. Get it in your heart. This is who I am. Repeat it. While you're getting ready, get your hair ready, you're brushing your teeth, you're shaving, the ladies are getting their makeup on. They're looking at what they wrote on the mirror. And like, I was born to be, I'm Daddy's favorite daughter. So I'm getting that in my spirit. The next thing I would say is I begin to ask the Holy Spirit for a strategy, as you said, to get out of debt. And that should be a strategy to save on the save side, as we were talking about. You save a little bit, you pay off that credit card. You save a little bit, you say, what's the next greatest interest thing we're paying on? Let's get that paid off. But while we're also saving, we're also doing what I said earlier, and we're taking that $100 or the $200, the $500. It's a metaphor. The amount is not as important as the fact that I'm going to work and I'm working for money. Let's say I'm working at McDonald's. Doesn't matter, whatever it is. I work at McDonald's and I'm working for money. But I get some money and I send the money out to work for me. I'm teaching my money. I am training. I am house training my money. And I'll say to my money, okay, money, go out and get me some more money. So, and I always encourage people, and the amounts aren't, you may say have different amounts, but I bet you have the same principle. I say tithe 10% and take 10% and live on 80. Live on 80%. Tithe 10% and make 10% your slave. Instead of you being a slave to money, you make money your slave. And you begin to teach your money. It's a little bit of a joke, really, but you begin to teach yourself how money makes money instead of you make money. So I go to work because I have to create some currency, right? Then I take some of that currency and I put the currency to work. So while I'm sleeping, the currency's still working. And that's what you were talking about, investments and entrepreneurship. And I really believe in that. But again, I do think that you have to deal with the inside while you're dealing with the outside. I don't think you have to wait. I think it's like, okay, once I get it all together and I really know who I am, then I'm going to start this, this wealth process. I'm like, no, do it at the same time. Put the scripture on the mirror, put the prophetic word on the mirror, deal with your inside, because the deal is if you happen to start to really prosper on the outside and you haven't taken care of your inside, you know what's going to happen. You're going to start figuring out ways that you don't deserve that money, that you don't deserve that prosperity. So I'm like, let's work on the inside and let's work on the outside simultaneously and grow both of those at the same time.
Wow. 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 So I hope you guys realize that you all need to go pick up this new book from Pastor Kris Vallotton, Poverty, Riches, and Wealth. Can you tell everybody a little bit more about the book, what they'll learn from it, and where they can pick it up?
Yeah, so they can buy it on Amazon or they can buy it on my website, Kris Vallotton. That's Vallotton. Kris is Kris. If you just put in Kris Vallotton, besides all the haters, you'll come right up to my website. By the way, you got to have enemies. Jesus said, "Love your enemies," so you got to have some. And so the first half of the book is all about what we shared about the principles of wealth. It's basically, what does God say about wealth? And by the way, if you don't like wealth, you're not going to like heaven, because heaven's gold streets and pearl gates and precious stones. So you got to think, well, if wealth was inherently evil, if wealth was like, can you imagine Jesus saying heaven's going to be like opium fields and marijuana gardens? It's like, no, because those things typically aren't good for you. So what I'm getting at is, if wealth was inherently evil, Jesus certainly wouldn't describe heaven as a place with gold streets and pearl gates and so on and so forth. So the first half of the book is dedicated to dealing with the mindsets. The second half of the book is practical ways, like some of the things we talked about just a few minutes earlier, like several very practical ways of how do I practically build wealth in my life. Like, what do I physically do with my money? How do I actually take my money and have it make money? And so the second half of the book is, I think, very practical. It does deal with some principles, but it'll get you started in your journey. It's not the last word, of course. I don't think any book is the last word on wealth, but it's the beginning. It's the first 10 miles of a 100-mile journey. It will get you started.
And we'll be sure to have links to the new book in the show notes of this episode. If you're watching us on YouTube, just look down in the description box below. Or if you're listening to the podcast, whatever app you're on, just scroll up and you will find the link there. Pastor Kris, this has been amazing. This has been super insightful, and we really, truly appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to share this with us today.
Thank you very much, and send my love to your wife, and God bless you.